Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Helen Miller and this is Head to Heart Living, how to live a life less from fear and more from love. Super excited today because I continue my series of speaking to extraordinary women. And today we have Caroline Carey, who, if you don't know, and you should do, and after today I'm sure you'll want to follow up on the links below to her website and her social media. She is a writer predominantly, but she is also a spiritual guide and how to really embody that in modern day living. So it isn't just something that you do on courses at the weekend, it's like actually accessing it in your daily life. And she runs retreats and workshops, residential and day workshops for women. And that was how I came across Caroline's work this summer. I had planned to be in another tent at a festival doing another workshop, but found my feet walking in the other direction and walked me into the where Caroline was. And then I was suddenly like, oh, I'm obviously meant to be here. My body knows best. And sat and listened to or experienced, it was embodied, a really fascinating journey on the fire of the crone. And so welcome, Caroline, and I really appreciate your time and you being with us today.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. That's a lovely way for us to have met. I really like little stories like that.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. And then I was fascinated and I wanted to know more. And then I went to another one of your workshops recently and we connected. And now I'm delighted to invite you to share here, because where I'd like to start today is that the theme of the menopause, and I work with a lot of clients who are going through the menopause, and it has, especially in the West, it hasn't really been acknowledged or revered or even seen as a rite of passage. And I think in the same way as I was raised by my mum, who was a child of the 60s, to see my monthly cycle, my bleed, as like the curse, as something like just take the pill and you don't need to worry about it, and like not honoring the female body and what it does and the cycles we go through in any shape or form. I think it's deeply connected to our disconnection from nature, and my own journey has been coming back into that. And I feel that this, not resurgence, but this like awakening and understanding in more contemporary mainstream about what the menopause is quite disconcerting for men on some levels. And but I guess I'd love to hear your journey with it and what your medicine is around it.
Okay, menopause, yeah. Well, like you, I didn't have much understanding of what it meant to start bleeding, to begin my menses journey. As a teenager, I was 13, and I didn't even know it was going to happen. I was that naive in those days, but my mother never told me anything about it, not a word. I can remember seeing a packet of the old-fashioned sanitary towels in the airing cupboard and asking her at a very young age what those were. And she said, oh, I'll tell you one day. And that was it, silence. And when I did have my first period, it was an absolute shock. I didn't know. I was wearing white tights at the time. Can you imagine? As a 13-year-old girl. And I was at a friend's house. It wasn't girls, it was boys, they were the friends of the family. So I was horrified. And so I hid everything away in the bottom of the laundry basket when I got home, and never said anything. And of course, my mother found this. And she said, oh, right, that started. Well, handed me a packet of same sanitary towels and one of these awful belts that we used to wear in those days. And, this is back early 70s. And we didn't have any of the stick-on fancy types that you have now. And that was it. She just handed it to me and said, this is what you've got to use. That goes there and that goes there. And right, there you go. So there was no rite of passage. There was no understanding. In fact, when I talked to a friend at school about it, she said, oh, well, it's just your body making space for a baby when you decide to have one. So I thought, wow, I'm just getting this cavern inside me that's going to make a space for this baby to grow. And, that was it. So, that is how my menses began for me. And quite strangely, but, I always had quite a healthy connection to my body in other ways. So I was always dancing. I was always walking. I was out with the animals. I understood a lot about giving birth because all my animals were giving birth all the time. We had a lot of rabbits and guinea pigs and things like that. But, so I was getting this understanding of the reproductive system in my own little way. And I was very connected to my body. I was a very physical child. And then as time went on, and I began dancing more, doing rites of passage, understanding more psychological work that I was doing, therapeutic work, that sort of thing. I was getting more and more in touch with what I had missed, what was lost, the innocence that I needed to reclaim, and how I could, adapt to some of these things and some of my own particular wounds. So I took that core wound, particularly around my menses, and started to create something from it, to write about it, to understand it, to look at what had been lost, and to what I needed to reclaim. And as time went on, and I was very aware of that my menopause would be coming when I was about 50, because the one thing my mother did say, she said, well, I started my periods when I was 13, so you will as well. She said, I had my menopause when I was 50, you'll have yours when you're 50. I don't know how true it is that we definitely follow in our mother's footsteps, but that was how it was in my family. So I knew that I was going to go through my menopause at 50, and I did. I had my last bleed when I was 49, and gradually then I could feel the process happening to me. Now I could feel it from about 42. I started having night sweats, and I also went, just shortly after that, I went into a new relationship. So we had this, this lovely blossoming woman who, I really was at that time coming into my fullness of being. It is a powerful time for women. We are at our most beautiful around menopause, I believe. And it's very strong, and there's a lot of creative fire going on. And so, I was getting these hot sweats, which I knew would happen, but I was waking up in the night drenched, absolutely drenched. I'd go to bed, put a towel down, have a little towel to wipe myself off with, and getting into this new relationship was a bit like, okay, I said, well, look, it's great lubricant, it's kind of nice, make use of it. He wasn't too sure about it, but it was uncomfortable at times, as at night times. And then I would have these hot flashes suddenly of like this raging heat would start bursting through me, and that was more uncomfortable because you'd be out in public and you'd be pulling all your clothes off, and it'd be midwinter or whatever. But I just used to say things like, well, I've got this great central heating system, and it's kind of a wonderful thing. But as I came to the stopping of my bleeding, one of the things I noticed was how creative I became. Really, really creative. I had to be creative. And I actually stopped a lot of my work. A lot of my work, sort of started to fold down a little bit. Now, I didn't choose that necessarily, because I needed to be working financially and because I love my work. But it did. It started to quieten down. And, my decision in that moment was to make use of that. So I was very fortunate that, I'd bought a yurt and had a yurt in the garden. So I had this place that I could go to for my own solitude as much as anything. But I spent a lot of time in there just looking at what I needed to create, to paint, to draw, to write, to be in solitude for periods of time. Now, I'm a busy mom. I've got 6 children, grandchildren coming out all over the place. And it was, I live a busy life, I'm a wife, I have a home to look after, animals, all that sort of thing. So it's not always easy to say to a woman, oh, you've got to go and be in solitude, you just got to be with yourself, all this kind of stuff. Like, we have to live our lives. But it was really important for me to take some time and just quieten myself to that process. I wanted to experience my menopause. That was really important for me. And we've talked a little bit about having a relationship, a good relationship to our womb. And I had a baby at 16. I was a young teenager, got pregnant, and I had that baby in very difficult circumstances. It was not a happy pregnancy, I would say. My little boy who was born then, I absolutely adore him, and there is nothing that I regret about it at all. But it was a very difficult birth, 24 hours in a hospital, legs strapped up, nurses and doctors shouting push, and I'm going, how? What do? I have no idea. And then I went through a very traumatic experience afterwards. And having my other children, gradually I started to make that relationship with my womb, with mothering, with giving birth. And to my sixth baby, you know, I had, well, all my last three babies were absolutely born naturally and at home. And, you know, I just loved giving birth. It was just an absolute wonderful thing. And my womb was so precious to me. In fact, it was only two that I struggled with because I was a teenager and I just didn't know. But, you know, as time has gone on and that relationship with my womb has developed, and even then you know, I made this collage during my menopause. It's a lovely collage, and I've still got it. I made it out of my blood, and I made it out of wrinkled up orange skins, and started to recognize, yeah, my womb is going to shrivel up and become like an old prune, and that's okay. That's good, because I can play with that idea and you know, sort of create from that and draw pictures of it. And you know, we've had a good time together. We've had a very interesting experience together. I could be rambling on here, you know, do butt in with questions.
No, it's fascinating.
I can just go on and on and on. But anyway, yeah, menopause, really important time, a very, very powerful time for me. And what I realized was that as I delved into that place within me and around me, I was starting to see what my purpose was in the world. And I recognized that, you know, we need to live through this cycle. We need to come through this time to get to really know who we are as women. And it's not until the menopause that we really can connect to that inner power source. And it's no longer about having children or, you know, giving out constantly to the world. You know, not every woman is going to have children, but we're all going to birth something. And it's our right. It's literally our right to birth something into the world. And that can be our purpose, you know, like the voice, you know, our particular offering or our gift. And we've got to parent that, and we've got to parent it well, because no one else is going to do that for us. You know, we're the parent of our own talent and gift. And so for me, it's about, you know, honoring that, and then, you know, looking at what I need to support me in order to bring it into the world. And it's at this time of menopause that we really get in touch with that. So for me, you know, yeah, wanting to have my own experience of menopause, even though there were women out there saying, oh, read this book and take this supplement and do this, do that. It's like, no, I didn't want any of that. All I wanted to do was experience what was going on for me and how this change was going to affect me and what I gave to the world, what my gift was, you know. And I had to spend a lot of time with that and understand it at a deep core level. Yeah. So that rite of passage, it can be a lonely one, but it's also not, because we need to connect with other women who understand it and have been in that place, who have been through that process. And, you know, that's what brings us home to our true nature, I believe. Yeah, and I'm sure that there are all kinds of thoughts around it and bodies of work and the like. But for me, it is, there is a very, very strong connection between menopause and purpose, soul purpose. You know, and that's what the crone is there to identify. That's her right, her particular right to say, this is who I am in the world, and not to shrink from that, not to hide from that, but to really inspire others to say, yes, I'm here. I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going to sit down. I'm not going to silence myself. I'm not going to cover up my wrinkles and my grey hairs and pretend that I don't exist. I'm going to come out in my fullness of being and show who I am. And that is vital for me. That is so beautiful, such a beautiful experience. I loved my menopause. I had a wonderful time, but I know if I hadn't been fully connected to my body at that time and hadn't done some of the healing work that I need to do around its core wound, then I wouldn't have been able to embrace it, I don't think.
It's so rich what you've just said, and there's a few points that I'd love to pick up on. I was moved to tears when you said my womb is so precious to me, because I think, our wombs are containers, and we often, as women, hold shame and guilt and fear there. And I know my personal journey healing with my womb, I just was disconnected. It was like a void, or it was like floating to the side of me. It was not an embodied space. And yeah, I was leading a very creative life, but nothing was really flying.
Yeah.
And now, like, just, and I find that there's when I unground and I feel my energy go up, it's like, no, come back to the womb, come back to the earth, come back and sit, and then and allow myself to feel. And so when you speak about making the time to feel and fully experience the menopause, like, it's so, I think there's such an intrinsic connection between the earth and our female bodies. And like, I have a ritual and a practice that I do every time I bleed now, because I didn't have a bleed for 4 years. And it's my bleed is so sacred to me, and I'm so excited every time I get it, because I spent so long praying for it. Like, I go and I honor the earth with it, and I make a little blessing, and it feels so precious to me that I can do that. And I know that, like, before I was on my path, if you told me about that, I'd be really freaked out. But it's so I think it's so reciprocal when we start to work with our bodies and understand our bodies in this way. And when I know that, just, it sounds for me like this, the antidote, this youth obsessed, like, plastic surgery, filter driven, sort of mainstream narrative that we have at the moment, and the sort of K-pop culture, and like this obsession with like youth and plastic doll looking women, all that does is create huge fear in the aging process. So to think of the menopause as actually being a time of fire and power and creativity and strength and beauty, and post the menopause, rather than maybe the connotations we have of the crone is of something old and ineffectual or bitter, but actually, as a medicine woman, as a wisdom carrier, as in your power, in your strength, like, that's exciting. And that means that we don't have to keep on looking backwards to what we were. And like, even like on my phone, it has this thing where it pops up memories from like 6 or 7 years ago, and I don't have to turn it off. It's like, I don't want to wake up and be constantly bombarded with the past. Like, I'm beginning my new day. I want to be looking forward. And I feel that, your work and what you're offering is, it's so exciting. And it's, especially in this country, where most of my lived experience has been, it's so needed. When I've spent time in South America, or they seem to have a different relationship with the aging process.
Yeah.
And I just think it's joyful, because I even feel it like creeping in, like when I see more wrinkles, and I'm like, and I have to turn, I sort of catch those thoughts and be like, leave, you're not wanted. I'm not, I don't want the marketing spiel to have any foothold in me.
There's even a little button somewhere on Zoom that you can click, and it'll take your wrinkles away. And I'm like, really? It's like, well, thanks. My wrinkles, I'm proud of my wrinkles. I mean, they're there for a reason. That's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily comfortable to begin with, because you're right. Society does portray women as having to be, younger, always younger. It's always something about being younger. And although it's changing, I do think it's changing these days. As more women are speaking out about it, I think it is we are seeing a bit of a shift, but there's a long way to go yet. I mean, you're absolutely right. But there's that need to make yourself look younger all the time. But what I'm saying is it is a bit scary. Certainly was for me. I was looking fantastic as my menopause began. I was the weight I wanted to be. I was my skin was fantastic. I was looking good, and I was strong and healthy and fit. I was going to the gym every day, and then suddenly my body was going, can't do this. You know, my muscles and bones are starting to ache. My joints are aching. Doesn't like it. I'm starting to feel much tireder, and I'm getting all this heat, and it's in some places it really doesn't feel good. And then you start to see those wrinkly bits on your skin, and it's not doing what it used to do. It has lost its elasticity, and it can be a bit of a shock, you know? So it's not like it's, oh yeah, great, I've got all this baggy, wrinkly stuff under my armpit and I'm feeling good about it. You know, it's not quite like that. But after a while, it doesn't matter anymore. But yeah, this is what my body needs to do. Just like the old trees, you know, are far more wrinkly than the young saplings and the smooth covered birch trees, and you know, they're looking all so beautiful and new. Do you know, we're not meant to look like that. And so it's adjusting to it. It's having a little bit of humor around it, so you can laugh with each other, with other women who have that. Said, oh, how's your bat swings going on, you know, like and just, yeah, just accepting, you know, it's that acceptance of it that is really important, and being proud of where you've come to in your life. You know, but as I say, if you can get creative with that, then I think there's a, yeah, that helps, nourishes some part of us that isn't just about what we're thinking up here. It's not just about the thinking mind and trying to work it all out. It's about actually having this visual representation of something that you're creating that is really potent, that means something to us. So I did all my ancestral, on my female lineage, all the ancestral line, bringing photographs up and taking a look at them and communicating with them and journeying with them, and, you know, inquiring into what it must have been like for them. So looking back at history, I know you say that, you know, you don't want to keep looking at history, but making friends with our history is one of the important things I find. So I've carried that guilt, I've carried shame, I've carried fears, I've carried all of those things in my body, and in some ways I still do, but I'm friends with them now. They don't rule me. They're not the backseat drivers of my life. You know, they are there, and they're real, and they can take me to some really, really important places in myself. You know, I always think of shame as a really beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman, you know. And yes, to go to and look at my shame and to journey with it is a difficult thing sometimes to do. But I imagine this well that goes deep, deep down into the ground, and, you know, shame can go there. It can go very, very deep, and it's treacherous. But I think of myself as just walking around the top of this well, walking around the rim of it, and just looking in and then looking out, and then looking in and looking out, saying, okay, you know, you are my friend. You remind me of things that I've needed to learn from, and it's important to me. And I'm not just shutting you out the door. You know, it puts me in touch with my humility as a human being, you know, and that there are others out there that who are stricken with shame or guilt or fear. And, you know, if I can just touch in a little bit of myself with that and say, hey, you know, we don't have to go so far into that well that it destroys us. But we can just say, hey, I'm here, and, you know, I'm going to hold hands with you until you can walk by yourself, and we're doing okay. We're all right. Yeah. Because I need to know where I've come from. That's that maiden part of me. She needs to know something. She needs to understand. You know, she needs a helping hand in the world that she didn't have back then. If I can learn to do that with myself, I can learn to do it with others.
I think that's so true, and that's the beauty of the healing path, is that you can then stop being somebody who needs help all the time, because there's obviously times when we all do, but is somebody who can offer help more of the time.
And we have to be careful with that, because sometimes all we're doing is offering help, you know, and that comes particularly from the adult child, the child who's become an adult too soon, for whatever reason, whether they've had to look after their parents haven't been well, there's been, you know, issues in the family, or it's something like, you know, you were responsible for too much. too much as a youngster. I was too responsible for animals, for the animals they had. And then I was too responsible, you know, too early, yes, it was too early for me to be so responsible for bringing a baby into the world. And I had a blind boyfriend at the same time, you know, and you know, and I had to leave home, you know, that the responsibility was building in me so much so from a very early age. I was also kind of responsible for my parents' emotions, I felt, because they didn't show them. So I was trying to work out what was going on in the family constantly. So there was, you know, that responsibility will take us into being an adult child, and then thinking that we're the ones that have got to rescue, have got to fix, have got to sort out, have got to save the world. And we're jumping in constantly to rescue others and to sort other people's problems out before we've really addressed our own. And that's where things can go really crazy, where we completely lose touch with ourselves and our process, our menses, our whatever it is that we're wanting to do. So it's getting that balance and recognizing, am I just jumping in there because I think I can, or because I need to do that because it helps me, or am I really being of service? In other words, have I been asked to help?
Yes.
The thing.
So the classic drama triangle of rescuer, savior, rescuer, persecutor, victim.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah, we just keep going around, you know,
Yeah.
building on resentments and frustrations, and why didn't they do it the way I said they should do it, and things like that. All that stuff goes on, you know.
And the other thing that I'd love to pick up on is the link which I've recently been exploring between the womb and the jaw, and the, you know, and essentially our right to speak, and how astrologically in 2020 over the winter solstice, which was an incredibly powerful time, the astrological sort of configuration was very similar, the most similar it's been to when the witch trials were happening.
Okay.
And that I feel that so much of the healing and rebalancing on the earth that is needed at this time is about, you know, the dismantling of the patriarchy, but really that just being the rebalancing of the masculine and feminine energies inside each of us. And for that rebalancing to happen, it will seem like lots of women standing up and saying a lot, but that's because there has been an imbalance. And that, or not necessarily saying a lot, but finding our own acknowledgement of our own feminine power and what that feels like and what it looks like, and how we've possibly been missold still our masculine power in female form, not actually our feminine power. And that this sense of being able to speak, because I think a lot of the time, and in my experience, it's like not wanting to rock the boat, or not wanting, you know, all these words that are attributed to when women do something to men, not to focus on division, but not understanding our right to speak, and wanting to, you know, for like in the fight or flight, like women really don't fight because physically we're not as strong as men, so we tend to fawn and please and not speak our truth. It's like, let me make you a cup of tea so you don't kill me, rather than fight you out the door. And so there's a sense of that we haven't been able to say what we need to, and this connecting to the womb. And actually, when we really connect to the womb, we can find that truth, and it flows and it comes out in the right way.
Yeah, and women can be incredibly controlling and manipulative and fight in many other ways. And I'm really not one for, you know, the sort of, you know, saying women have got it right and men, you know, have got to behave themselves and this kind of stuff. It's like, you know, a lot of my friends are men, and, you know, they have their own struggles, and we women have got a lot to answer for as well. And I think that's really important to stress. You know, when am I fighting somewhere in the quiet? Like, you know, my mother was a great manipulator. Do you know, I never saw her get angry, but my goodness, she could sulk and, you know, judge and criticize underneath the blanket of niceness, middle-class niceness, you know, and I learned to do some of those things. So I tried to change my husbands and boyfriends, and, you know, and tried to think I could say the right thing and they would do it, you know, that sort of stuff. So, you know, I'm very aware of that. But it's interesting you talk about the jaw and connection to the womb and, you know, our voices, because do you know, if you're ever in the dance with me, you'll hear me often say, you know, relax the face and relax the jawbone, even open the mouth when we're moving, you know. Even, you know, not just in the dance, but even in a walking meditation, in when we're doing our creativity, it's like relax the jawbone. And in birth, you know, if we're tight here, you know, the jaw is very connected to the hip area and what needs to open, the pelvic floor that really needs to open when we give birth. If we're tight here, it's very difficult to relax down there. So if you're doing a dance or movement or whatever it is, you know, and you focus on relaxing this, you know, just opening the mouth and breathing deeply, and then softening the hips and the knees, you notice the energy just really helps you connect to the earth. And of course, that's going to help with the passage of the baby. You know, it's like just give to the earth. And if we do that in the dance, there is something energetically that happens that enables us to give our gift to the earth, to birth it, literally birth it, whatever we're doing. So that's something that I always encourage. And regards our voice, yeah, we have learned, you know, in the classroom, if you've got a mixed classroom, boys and girls, guaranteed it's the boys that will speak out far more than the girls. I never spoke out. I went to an all-girls school to begin with. In that school, it was Catholics and Church of England Protestants. And, you know, it was a Catholic school, Catholic nuns. And, you know, all the good little Catholics sat at the front, and they, you know, they were all, you know, answering the questions, and us Protestants were sitting at the back, like dared not say anything, or, you know, they went into the lovely plush chapels and we had to sit outside on the cold concrete and wait for them. You know, that's how my voice was stifled to begin with. And then being amongst boys, you know, I had an older brother. Well, yeah, he spoke up far more than I did. And, you know, I had to just play safe all the time. I didn't want to speak out. You know, I felt too disturbed by it, too shy by it, too inhibited by it. I was going to say the wrong thing, guaranteed. I wasn't an academic in any shape or form, and my language was always very poetic. So I'd rather sit and dream looking out the window and, you know, hope the bell would go soon so I could get home to my animals, who understood everything that I said, of course. You know, great communications with them. But yeah, our voices get shut down for many, many different reasons. They're not encouraged. You know, young girls were often not encouraged to speak out. So, and it goes way, way back to Victorian times. You know, children should be seen and not heard. You know, it's ingrained in our DNA almost. So now it is a time, I think, for the feminine voice. And the feminine voice doesn't just have to come from women. It can come from men.
Indeed.
You know, this feminine voice that's longing to come through. But primarily women are the ones that are going to have to speak out about their wounds and how it's affected them, and the silencing and the particular core wound that they each hold, which is why I've been writing about it. You know, I write about that stuff in my memoirs more than anything, because that's important to me. You know, sharing it is part of the journey of healing it for myself.
I think there's such medicine in that, and I think as a sort of final point that I'd like to share in what it is in my own experience, and it's, you know, it's really easy to listen to podcasts or put on YouTube and listen to conversations like this and sort of nod along in the car or while you're cooking. But the real change in the world is each of us doing the inner shift and looking at where we have sat on our resentment and not spoken out, or thought about, you know, I'm the only woman in this board meeting and my voice isn't being heard. And it's like, actually, so how can you find that place of approval in yourself so that your voice does land and that your energy does change and you find the healing that you need in order to be the woman that is heard, not from a place of anger. And, you know, and as a, you know, men, how do you find your feminine energy so you can express yourself in a way that is different, that is within your feminine energy, and that is those internal journeys that are often really painful and tender, that is the shift.
Absolutely. And you know, it's not that. I think what's happened, and when we talk about fighting, it's like the woman in the boardroom who's on her own there, like fighting to get her voice out there, so she becomes that sort of you know, a more masculine force of herself. rather than saying, okay, acknowledging and recognizing that, oh, I have this wound, and I need to acknowledge it, and I need to accept it on some level. Do you know, it's the feminine ways to accept. It's like to and then to nurture. Do you know, it's like I have this wound. I can't speak out in these places. I'm finding it really difficult. Something is silencing me, and it's me. It's not nothing else is happening in these adult, you know, moments. But there's something there. But then I need to start taking action in order to look at, well, how can I bring my voice out? What do I need in order to do this? Not, okay, I'll just shout and join in with this macho energy or whatever it is that's going on and try to be like that. How do I bring the feminine voice in without it getting knocked down, without it causing me, you know, too much discomfort, without me having to fit in with what others might see as normality? So it's really speaking from the heart. And I think that is what needs to happen for anybody. It's like learning to really speak from the heart, but also not being silenced in that place when somebody talks over you or whatever happens. It's like, you know, okay, they need to do that. And then it's, okay, now I'm going to come back to where I was. I hear you, but I'm going to come back to what I'm needing to finish saying here. So you don't let it be completely disrupted and just throw your hands in the air and walk out. You know, that's not going to work. It's like letting them know that you have to come back to, this is what needs to be shared right now. This is what's going on in my heart, not a manipulation of I need to change somebody else. Yeah, everything else has got to change in order for me to do this. No, we have to find a way to bring that, you know, to bring it out into the environment that we're in a healthy, sustainable way. And that is that connection. And at the same time, the connection to the wound. Do you know, I have a wound. Yeah, I do have a wound. We all do. And until we can really embrace that and make friends with it, we can't speak really from the heart. We can't speak from personal experience because we don't know what that experience is. So it's always about, finding what that is, you know, acknowledging it, accepting it, and then finding the appropriate actions to help us bring it a little further into the world, not in a way that's damning of others.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I think that's a really beautiful place to draw things in and finding a way. And as a way, my work is about head to heart living. So how do you listen to your heart? How do you then have the courage to follow through with what it's guiding you to do? And I know that you have got many beautiful books out there. And at the moment,
I've got it right here, actually. It's Misguided Angel Revisited, which is a rewrite from my very first book, Misguided Angel, that I wrote a long time ago, and it was published. And I knew there was more. I always knew there was more to share about my story. And this has been such an important journey for me to finally put in it, you know, and it covers some of my menses story as well. But it's been so important for me to be able to rewrite it, revisit it, and then be able to come back and say, okay, this is my grown-up version. This is it now. But yes, other books as well. They're all on my website, and and different creative projects that I have on offer.
And I fully recommend going in person to Caroline's workshops. They are magical and transformative, and you meet amazing people. So do check out her website below and all the social media links where you can follow her so you can stay in the loop about what's going on and look at the books that she's got, because yes, you can hear the way that Caroline speaks and how magical it is and engaging, and she really takes you on a journey and helps you really understand in depth what we're talking about. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Helen. It's been lovely to share with you.
Really lovely. And thank you to everybody who's maybe on my channel for the first time. If you want to find out about other extraordinary people that I speak to, I have other videos and teachings and sharings. You can look at the back library. Please like, subscribe, share this to your tribe, share this to people who you think would resonate with what we've been talking about today. And in the comments, let me know what are your takeaways, what points really stood out to you. Like when Caroline said about her precious womb, like that really brought tears to my eyes. Like, where has the medicine been for you? I'd love to hear this, because it helps inform what I do as well. So thank you to Caroline. Thank you to everybody who's watched, and sending you all so much love. I'll be back soon.